This week, we welcome Mark Brown, Senior Director of Standards Connect from ANSI. In the Leadership and Communication segment, Life Lessons of Ben Franklin, A Lesson in Leadership, How to Start a Speech, the best and worst speech openers, and more. Business Security Weekly starts now.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we explore the business of security to improve the security of business. Your trusted source for actionable insights on leadership, communication, and innovation. Get ready for Business Security Weekly. Security can't solve crucial problems when they have to wade through thousands of alerts a day. With ServiceNow, you can easily prioritize and respond to your most crucial business threats. That way you can go from overwhelmed to under control. ServiceNow brings security, risk, and IT together on one platform. Learn more at securityweekly.com/ServiceNow. The question is simple. Have any of the systems on my network been compromised? The answer is harder than it should be. Enter AI Hunter. Active Countermeasures has automated and streamlined techniques used by the best pen testers and threat hunters in the industry to create AI Hunter, a network threat hunting solution that does the first pass of a hunt for you to identify systems that are most likely to be compromised and scores the results on a scale from 0 to 100. You can then research those systems in depth with AI Hunter. Focus your valuable time on the systems that need your expertise with AI Hunter. Sign up for a personal demo today at securityweekly.com/ACM.
Welcome to Business Security Weekly. This is episode number 135, recorded July 8th, 2019. I hope everyone had a great and long Independence Day holiday weekend. I am your host, Matt Alderman in Colorado, joined by my co-host, Jason Albuquerque in G-Unit Studio in Rhode Island.
Hey, Matt, how you doing? I hope everybody had a great 4th of July.
Yeah, we got this really long weekend, but, you kind of had that one work day in the middle. Some people worked, some people didn't, but, it was a nice break.
That's why I strategically took that day off.
Yes, good idea. Security Weekly is returning to Vegas this August for both Black Hat and DEF CON. If you'd like to request a briefing or sponsor an interview on site at Black Hat, please go to securityweekly.com/booking and submit your request. We are getting pretty full, so hurry up. Also, some of you have told us that you're overwhelmed by the amount of content we distribute. In an attempt to make it a little easier for you to find what you're looking for, we've created our new listener interest list. Sign up for the list and select your interest by visiting securityweekly.com/subscribe and clicking the button to join the list. All right, time for our interview segment. Mark Brown has been connecting companies, big and small, with standards for nearly 25 years. Mark began at the American National Standard Institute, a nonprofit known as ANSI, in 2006 as Director of Standard Subscriptions to develop a subscription-based model for access to standards. Licensing standards in this fashion proved popular, and the subscription model has seen tremendous growth. Mark is now the Senior Director of Standards Connect, which is ANSI's standards management solution for subscriptions. Prior to joining ANSI, Mark worked at a for-profit standards company and started his career in product development and product marketing. Mark, welcome to Business Security Weekly.
Thank you, Matt.
So I know ANSI from some of my earlier days in security, right around, early 2000s, ISO 17799, 27000 series came out. I believe, and I want you to give us a little history on ANSI. I believe ANSI was the U.S. Standards organization for licensing some of those original standards in the ISO framework. Is that correct?
That's correct. ANSI has actually been around since 1918 and has been the member body representing ISO and IEC in the United States almost since its inception. So ANSI has been the member body as multiple countries have member bodies representing ISO. ANSI is the one for representing them in the U.S.
Right. And that's where I think I ran into ANSI probably way back then in those early days as everybody was trying to, license the ISO content for use either as part of program and standards development. So give us a quick kind of overview then of ANSI as a whole. I mean, yeah, it started in 1918, but you're also been building out additional standards capabilities, I think, also for folks in the industry. So curious what you've been doing over the past number of years.
Well, I can't go back as far as 1918 with personal experience, but ANSI's been around for quite a while, as we just discussed, and I think of the organization as having three arms. There's the arm for accreditation. The accreditation arm is the business unit that actually does the certification and accreditation for standards developing organizations in the United States, such as ASTM, UL, ASSE, ASME. There's over 120 different standards developers that ANSI represents, as well as membership. ANSI's other arm of revenue income for sustaining the nonprofit is membership, which gives people an opportunity to participate in panels and technical committees, which are developed to bring new technologies and standards to the market. It's a general consensus. So the people that sit on the technical committees have to completely agree before a standard is published. And then there's the publications arm, which is the area I'm involved in, which is the subscription piece, which if I think of in two different kind of sections, there's the retail component, which if you just need one standard for one person, you can go to the web store and purchase it and download it, and you have the standard right there. If you've got multiple people or multiple standards, a combination of multiple sites, multiple users, and multiple standards, then a subscription is a good model to go because you're assured that everybody's accessing the right content at the same time and that it's current.
Got it. Now, for people who aren't familiar with standards, and most people I think in our industry are because we've seen so many of them over the years, kind of what's the foundation for a standard? And how does that come to fruition? I'm very familiar with the ISO 27000 series standards because of the early days in cybersecurity, but what is a standard and how does it begin its life?
Well, a standard is something that is, as I had mentioned, general consensus. So a standard is not law. A standard is something that organizations use to develop their product or stay within compliance, for example, in pharmaceuticals or finance, their food safety. There are a lot of different areas that standards touch on, pretty much everything. But an example I like to use is light bulbs. You go to the store, you don't really think about it. You just go to the store, buy a light bulb for the lamp that you need. You come home and you screw it in, the light bulb fits in the socket. That's because there's a standard that the light bulb is made to a specific specification so that it does fit in the socket. Companies could make light bulbs with any size socket they want, but if they aren't following a standard, they're not going to sell very many.
Got it. Now, how do we apply that to security? Because we can go on a couple little tangents here on standards around security, but organizations do or don't have to follow a security standard like ISO 27001, for example. So what's the incentive for organizations to leverage some of the security standards that are out there?
I think in most part it's for their customers' security and safety. So a lot of examples, for example, you can become ISO 27001 certified. That doesn't mean a company has to be ISO 27001 certified to have a safe IT security department, but that's a guideline to follow the checks and balances to make sure that you are and following the right processes. So if you look back over time when there have been breaches in different stores, sites, or different credit card databases, people are very, very aware of making sure or trying to make sure that their customer base or their information is safe from any hacking. So customers feel safe to use them as a provider.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, but ANSI, I think the beauty of ANSI is you guys take that big tent consortium mentality where you have engineering subject matter experts, you have the government involved, you're really playing to the community and making sure you have as many stakeholders as you possibly can influencing these standards, correct?
Correct. So for example, if you go back to when before IT existed, and there obviously weren't standards around IT security because they didn't exist. As technology develops and new things come into play, like um, artificial intelligence or self-driving vehicles, things like that, that haven't been in the market in the past, standards get developed around those topics to make sure that it's safe for the consumer. The way that those standards get developed is by pulling together a panel of representatives from industry, both from the technology standpoint and the actual developers, manufacturers, and people who are working in that industry. And ANSI oversees that process to make sure that everybody's fairly represented and that everything is all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed to make sure that the standards that are being developed are going to be beneficial for the U.S. overall, not just a specific organization.
No, that's great. I mean, just in my experience dealing with the ISO 27000 series, it's obvious because being an organization like mine that leverages NIST as its kind of central pillar as a framework for its information security management, it maps back really great to ISO 27001. So when we're dealing with our clients who have ISO 27001 mandates or policies that their third-party vendors need to adhere to, I can easily map that back to my centralized NIST framework and be able to say, here are all the different controls I have in place, and it translates well back and forth to the other frameworks.
Sure, because there's always, if you look at, I'll give you an example of, to steer a little bit away from IT security, but occupational safety and health.
Mm-hmm.
That is the standards that are in that are primarily referenced in CFR 29, 1910 and 1926, which is CFR is published out of the Federal Register and updated on a daily basis by the government. There are standards referenced in that from probably about 25 to 30 different standards developing organizations. So it's not just the ISO standards or ASSE or ASTM or other standards developers that play into a specific topic. But oftentimes, if it's something like quality or occupational safety and health, there are multiple standards developers that have different components of bringing together a safe environment or a safe resolution to a need.
That's great. Now, if I'm an organization and why are standards important? Why would I look to ANSI to help me frame the problem a little bit from the organizational side? Why standards? Why ANSI? Where's some of that value benefit with what you guys are doing?
Well, what I see as the value benefit for a subscription is if you have multiple standards along with multiple users in multiple locations. It can be one location with multiple users or multiple standards to give you the solution that you need. But essentially, what it comes down to is, in order to be successful in business, organizations want to make sure that they're in compliance, whether it be for IT security or food safety or pharmaceutical manufacturing or manufacturing of big off-road equipment. All of those things are built and developed to standards. And if their customer base understands that they're following these standards and guidelines, which in the US are a voluntary consensus, then they're more apt to do well in their business as opposed to somebody who goes out and decides they're going to develop something that doesn't follow any of the standards. You're not going to be able to find parts. You're not going to be able to guarantee compliance within certain areas. So overall, I think it's a matter of consumer confidence and compliance.
Got it. Now, talk about Standards Connect. how does Standards Connect work? It's something you've developed, I think, over the years at ANSI. You've been there for a number of years. Standard Connect is now the delivery platform for the ANSI standards?
Correct. So Standards Connect is a product name, and it is a product that is a platform that allows delivery of the standards. There's a URL, a company becomes a subscriber to whatever standards they need to for their needs. You go on to Standards Connect, you do a one-time registration, and then you can view any of the standards and or download any of the standards that you subscribe to. It also gives you the ability to look at anything that's in the catalog. So there's over 600,000 standards, and if you only subscribe to 1,000, you only see the 1,000 that you subscribe to as far as the full download of the standard, but you can use the platform to view the other 599,000 to be able to see the abstracts, the titles, and get an idea of if it's something that you actually need. The other abilities that it has is you can do alerting, you can do watch lists. So if you want to set up to make sure that you don't miss any updates on a standard that you're following, you can set an alert so you get an email alert if it updates. If you're doing a project that is project-based with a specific group, you can put a watch list together of standards that are just for that project and include the different people from the group, and also set alerting on that. So it provides the ability to, I think, better manage the content, be assured that you have the latest updates, and that everybody's working from the same standards base.
No, that's great. So for folks who already have a GRC system where they manage their authority documents or their standards, do you offer web service integration so that way GRC systems that are already in existence can get updated via that web service?
Yes and no. Great question. We partner with several different providers that have GRC tools already in place, and work with them to allow the content. Not everybody has the same solution as a GRC tool, so they approach it from a different angle. Essentially, the license is with ANSI to be able to access the content, and then ANSI has a license with the GRC solutions provider to allow them to include the content in their solution. So for example, some companies will just pull the control statements out of a standard like ISO 27001, 27002, and include them in their documentation and to create a checklist. ANSI has the license with the company and allows them to do that.
Very good.
So a GRC customer that can do that, the GRC company needs to have a relationship with ANSI to allow that in, but then the customer needs to have their own license to embed that into their instance of the solution. Is that the right way from a licensing perspective to think about it?
Correct. There are, I think of it as partners and or service facilitators or software integrators. If you approach it right now, ANSI has partners with different GRC companies, which the model that you just spoke about is the way that it's structured. So the company has a license with ANSI, and they get the delivery through the GRC company, and ANSI has a contract with that organization. There are some scenarios that aren't in place at this time, but that would allow a software integrator to, say, integrate the content into their platform. It's a little bit different model, and it's a little bit harder to track because ANSI doesn't own the content. ANSI is not the copyright holder. So we're held accountable by the different standards developers such as ISO or ASTM or any of the other 120 plus standards developers to protect their copyrighted material. And a lot of times our contracts with them state how we can and can't partner with or deliver their information.
Got it. Yeah. So you're kind of you're almost like the broker, right? You sit in the middle of the standards body and deliver that content out to your different partners and customers and integration points. And so there's only, you kind of sit in the middle, and you have to be careful on how some of that is licensed so you can protect both sides of the equation, which is interesting.
Right. It's a balancing act that ANSI actually does very well. it's something that gives us the opportunity to work with multiple, not just standards developers who are ANSI accredited, but other American standards developers. They don't have to be ANSI accredited to be something that's on our platform. It's not required.
Right. Now, who's typically the buyer? Because your standards cross multiple buyer personas. Do you see different people? I can imagine accessing, but who's the primary buyer? Is it legal at the end of the day? Because legal is the one that's in the position to have to deal with these standards across various parts of the organization. How does this work in a normal organization?
You might think that legal would be a logical place for this to land, but typically it's not. Oftentimes it is. It changes over time as well. In the past, it used to be more specifically engineers, technical libraries. A lot of larger corporations would have technical libraries, and they managed all the standards in that part of their organization. Now we do what I say is a great job of providing a solution horizontally across multiple verticals. Because if you take IT security as an example, it's not just any organization, whether they're building aircraft or earth moving machines or developing pharmaceuticals or food safety or packaging food, they need IT security typically for their organization. So we go horizontally across a lot of organizations, and our typical customer would either be an IT manager, quality manager, safety manager. Oftentimes there's a manager component in their title, but typically it's around quality, safety, IT security, cybersecurity, something like that.
So do you see the initial engagement with your customers kind of a one-off, like the quality manager comes in and buys the standards around quality, the security manager comes in and buys the standards for security? When does it make sense to leverage something like Standards Connect where you can start to bring all that together and consolidate that? Because I would imagine the transaction's kind of one off initially, but then they start to hopefully realize that they can get more through the Standards Connect offering.
Right. It's funny. It depends on the organization because some companies are very cognizant of that and they have somebody centralized in their organization that manages all their standards and pulls it together. So the quality person, the safety person, the IT person all go through a central point and get all the standards on a subscription through Standards Connect. Other companies, even some large companies, it's surprising how segmented they are. And the IT group, I think a lot of it has to do with budgeting and tracking, but the IT group may have a subscription for their requirements, whereas the safety group would have a separate subscription, even though you try to convey to them that it could be consolidated into a single license and everybody could just have access to all of the things. It depends on how they're structured as an organization, and we just accommodate what their requirements are.
Got it. And then from a cost perspective, Standard Connect kind of simplifies the bundling and the way those standards get delivered. I'm just trying to figure out from a costing perspective, because if somebody's thinking about how to budget for this, how would they think about that?
That's an ongoing challenge because each license or each subscription is custom. And so it's an educational process with the customer to start with. And people, of course, want to know how much is a subscription or how much is a subscription to ANSI standards. And so the first thing that we have to do is talk them through and explain that ANSI standards can mean, if you talk to 10 different people and ask them what ANSI standards means to them, you're going to get 10 different answers. So we need to first figure out what exactly their requirements are and then price out the subscription based on their different needs. So it could be anything from one standard and one SDO. So a company could have an IT department that has 10 people at one location and they just need a subscription so everybody has access to 27001. And that's going to be a smaller subscription. Although if you have larger organizations with multiple engineers and multiple departments of safety quality, and they're using maybe 20 different standards developing organizations with thousands of standards, that's another model that is something that Standards Connect is great at providing a solution for. The one thing is the more standards through the more standards you have in your subscription, the average cost per standard goes down. So there's a base cost for a subscription. If you're just having one standard for 10 people, you're going to start out at kind of a base cost. And if you add one or two standards, it might not even go up. But if you're an organization that has thousands and thousands of standards, the average cost per standard is going to be much less than, say, if you only have one standard and it's an organization with 10 people, the average cost per person is going to be, say, let's just say $100. Whereas if you had that one standard across thousands and thousands of people in the organization, the average cost for that standard is going to be a lot less, maybe 10 cents.
So you're realizing
per person.
Economies of scale across the organization. So it would be in the best interest of those organizations who are siloed to take a step back and maybe think about consolidating down, huh?
Exactly. And no matter how much we try, because of how some of their systems are structured, they're kind of stuck with, they say, I appreciate it and I understand what you're saying, but I'm stuck with my budget for my department.
Right. So it does, from a recommendation standpoint, it does make sense. Kind of step back, look at it much more holistically, figure out all the different standards that you have, all the different groups, all the different locations, and see if you can build a better bundle than just continuing to do a bunch of one-offs.
Correct. And that's one of the things that our sales group does, is try to work with them to help them understand the overall picture and the cost savings. Not only that, but it occasionally somebody in safety might need to look at a quality standard or vice versa. And then they're there for everybody in the organization to see.
Right. Yeah, that crossover to different groups,
sense.
needing the ability to see some of that. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Jason, any additional questions for Mark while we have him here?
No, from my perspective, I mean, having a subscription-based model like this is definitely a benefit to organizations, right? Number one, you're getting real-time updates. So like Mark mentioned, you can get notifications. You can potentially have modules to integrate with your GRC systems. And really, it's that real-time information that you're receiving. So the benefit, I mean, it's definitely beneficial for organizations to have a subscription like this, especially when you're dealing with standards management or having to manage some type of an organization that has to have that GRC component that you're looking back at. I would even say, ANSI, in my perspective, it totally helps organizations who don't necessarily have the certification, like my own, right? So we're a NIST-based organization, but being able to tie back those controls to NIST that are in ISO 27001, let's say, gives the added benefit to clients of ours who have to manage to those standards and certifications. So it really complements other frameworks.
Agreed. Mark, I'd like to thank you for joining us on Business Security Weekly.
You're welcome.
If anyone wants to learn more about ANSI, Standards Connect, or activate a free trial, please visit securityweekly.com/ANSI. We'll take a quick break and then cover the leadership and communications articles for this week.